Welcome to Wilson Center Now, a production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. I'm John Molesky. Today our guest is Lauren Risi, Project Director with the Wilson Center's Environmental Change and Security Program. And Lauren joins us in the aftermath of a major program conducted by her and her program on water issues, global water issues. Lauren, welcome. Yes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is from the promotional copy when you were announcing the event to the world at large. It says, a rapidly changing climate and shifting demographics means the future of water resource management may not look like the past. So I'm wondering, what did the past look like and what has changed?
That's a good question. I think, there's always been this underlying sense that water can lead to conflict, right? And that is something that the Environmental Change and Security Program has for the last 25 years. Really spent a lot of time analyzing, convening experts to really understand what does water mean at the local level, at the subnational level, at the regional level, right? And what we found is that counter to prevailing notions, perhaps, there's more often cooperation over water. And I think that we anticipate that to be the future trend as well, but it will get harder as we have things like growing populations, rapid urbanization, and a changing climate. We're going to see a lot more variability and uncertainty in weather patterns, in precipitation patterns, and availability and access to clean water. And so how do we account for that uncertainty?
And I'm guessing even in those circumstances where it begins as conflict, that there's motivation to come up with a solution that's a nonviolent solution.
No, yeah, absolutely. And conflict is a complex phenomenon. It's very rarely one thing that leads to conflict. So even if water is part of a conflict, it's a part of a conflict, right? And it can often be a source for coming together for an agreement, for creating some cooperation and collaboration.
When we're talking about water as a problem, are we talking about pollution? Are we talking about just shortages of fresh water? What are the types of things? Or is it too much water, flooding? What are the things we're talking about?
That's a good question. So, just last week, the U.S. government launched the National Climate Assessment. It was the 4th National Climate Assessment. And I think, it had a section on water, and it really lays out sort of 3 key areas where we see some challenges. One is on the quantity and quality of water looking forward. So we're going to have changing precipitation patterns. That's going to change the quantity of water, whether it's floods or droughts. We're going to have a depletion of groundwater. And, groundwater is often not discussed. We don't see it, but it's a very important source of water, and it's often...
We'll know it if it's not there.
Exactly, absolutely. And then just surface water, just the changing quality in the surface water. The second area that they outline is deteriorating water infrastructure. And so we see this in the U.S., and we're seeing it around the world. The third area that they highlighted is this water management and planning. Our current practices don't account for the uncertainty and variability that we can expect to see with water. And so how can we change our systems so that we are better prepared to anticipate and respond to changing weather patterns and water availability?
That last thing, the planning response.
Right.
How far down the tracks are we in that regard? Have we been using planning assumptions that just don't hold up any longer?
I think that's a tough question to answer globally. I think one of our speakers yesterday, Richard Matthew, really highlighted some amazing progress that has been made in data and computing and modeling capabilities. And one of the things that struck me was how quickly we've advanced in our abilities to create these models, to be able to help communities understand, to visualize where the impacts that they can expect to see are going to be coming. That being said, some of the challenges are connecting the technology with the problem and with the community, and making sure that the technologies are responsive to the community, that they're relevant to the community, and that they're not price prohibitive, right? So some of that's a challenge.
Right, have to be scalable to the reality.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm guessing just pure good old-fashioned resistance to change comes into play here in the politics of this, getting people to change the way they live and maybe the way they use water.
Yeah, I think when you look across the globe, there's some people who are, in the U.S., we use a lot more water than they do in other parts of the world, right? And so the solution sets are going to look different in different areas. I think that universally, though, what we can say is that the institutions matter, that the governance mechanisms matter, and that what we need is, so Aaron Wolf spoke yesterday. he is really renowned as a water expert. In the 1990s and early 2000s, he developed the Basins at Risk project, and that really turned the narrative on its head that water leads to conflict, because he, using a number of different indicators and evidence-based research, was able to show that, especially in terms of transboundary water, we don't often lead to conflict. And it's the second point that came out of that it's not necessarily scarcity that leads to conflict. It's the variability and the uncertainty. So what we need are institutions and governance mechanisms and agreements that are flexible and are able to change with the variability. And so I think that is what we're going to have to see moving forward.
I should mention that many of the programs and speakers that Lauren is describing will be available to you as webcasts at wilsoncenter.org. And if you come to the Environmental Change and Security programs page, you'll be able to find all of that material from the event that happened here this week. Yeah. If you can generalize about the mood of the group,
yeah.
Is there a sense of urgency around these issues?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. The U.S. released the first U.S. Global Water Strategy last year. That's an interagency strategy, and I know that the across the U.S. government, people are working very hard to ensure a more water secure future, and that's not just about securing safe access to water and sanitation in the most vulnerable parts of the world, but it's also making sure that the U.S. national security interests aren't threatened by water insecurity around the world.
People who live in coastal regions are obviously a lot more sensitive to some climate change impacts, and then people who live in California, where there are wildfires, and other places where there are droughts. Is water like that? Is this an issue where in some communities it's not given a second thought because every time you turn on the tap, you have everything you need?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there was a water crisis in South Africa last year in Cape Town, right? And
mm-hmm.
they
were talking about hitting a point of water zero.
Right. And I think that was a very effective communication strategy, because that underlined the fact that there was going to be a severe crisis. And because of that, they were able to institute some effective policies and get the communities on board with using less water, and they were able to avoid sort of that ground zero. But in the U.S., we haven't really seen that. The fires in California, absolutely. We've seen coastal inundation and huge displacements as a result of hurricanes. But in terms of just being able to turn on the tap and flush your toilet, that's not something that we experience here, and that has a lot to do with our governance mechanism.
The migration you mentioned, is this an issue that has people moving and changing the way and the places people live?
Yeah, and I think that we can expect, with an increase in the severity and number of extreme weather events, we're going to see an increase in migration. Migration is complex. It's also it's difficult to point to a single cause and a driver that pushes somebody to move. There's political, social, economic, demographic reasons that people move. But in 2017, there were 40 million internally displaced people, and
mm-hmm.
these are people who have had to leave their community but remain in their country of origin. The number of people who had moved because of the extreme weather events was much greater than those who had moved because of conflict or violence. So we had about, I think, 19...
More than war.
Right. 19 million of those people were displaced because of weather-related events, as opposed to 12 million as a result of conflict and violence. And that number will continue to grow.
This is, as you know, the 50th anniversary year for the Wilson Center. And John Tyler, one of our colleagues, one of the producers of this program, was telling me earlier today that some of the original documents of the first years of the Wilson Center included research on water. We've been ahead of the curve for a long time, and I know that is certainly one of the hallmarks of the program you work with. When will the rest of the world catch up? When will these water issues start to reach a tipping point in politics where they're part of the public policy discussion in a more significant way?
I think that I think in some ways we're there. Like, I think that there are for people in parts of the world whose livelihoods depend on the land around them and the water on that land, they understand on a daily basis the importance of water. And I think that a lot of the leaders of those countries understand the importance of water. I think that they are regionally, they're coordinating, they're working out agreements, they're trying to figure out how to secure that water. I know the European leaders understand it. I do think that water is a topic that really is an effective a topic in uniting at all levels of government.
Yeah, we all need it, right?
Yes, yeah.
Before we close, is there anything else about the day-long conference? Any highlights you'd want to mention? Because I do want to give another plug to those of you watching or listening to us today that you can access all that material that we're talking about. Any other highlights you'd point out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been some really interesting and important research done. Janani Vivekananda talked about some research that they're conducting in the Lake Chad Basin. That a lot of the assumptions about Lake Chad is that it's shrinking, and actually they find that it's expanding, and it's always shrinking or expanding. The challenge right now is that it's shrinking and expanding in unanticipated ways, and so the communities, the way that they've operated with the lake has had to shift, and there's a huge humanitarian crisis, and so trying to find the sources of that crisis and where the solutions are is a focus of her project. And I think that something that comes across all of these issues is that as we go into vulnerable places and try to build peace and try to build prosperity, we need to be doing it in a climate-proof way, right? So we need to be thinking ahead and anticipating where we might see changes and making sure that whatever policies and programs and infrastructure we bring is climate-proof. And on the flip side of that, when we're going in and responding to climate change, it needs to be conflict sensitive. We need to be making sure that we're working with the communities and the stakeholders and sort of working from the bottom up rather than all top-down decisions.
The onus to adapt's on us because nature's going to do what nature's going to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Lauren, thank you. Congratulations on that
thank you very
terrific
much.
program. And again, if you'd like to watch it, it'll be available at wilsoncenter.org, as will this program today. And Wilson Center Now is available to you both in the video version and as a podcast. And you can find all of the programming from ECSP and from Wilson Center Now at wilsoncenter.org. Thanks for joining us. And Lauren, thanks again.
Thank you.